Hey everyone, thanks so much for coming. I really appreciate it. My name is Lucas Gutterman. I run the Design to Last campaign with US PIRG, the US Public Interest Research Group. We're a national nonprofit that works to protect consumers and the public interest and the environment. And I'm here today to talk a little bit about the disposability treadmill that just has us replacing our phones and our laptops and our appliances at ever increasing rates. And so by the end of this, I hope that you sort of know the extent of the problem and why this is a really urgent, big deal that we need to work on. But also I'm going to leave with 5 problem products and 5 solutions. And then we're actually just going to take action at the end on one of these issues as well. But a little bit more about me. So like I said, I run this campaign that's called Design to Last. I got my start as a student volunteer with my local PIRG chapter at UMass Amherst. I studied computer science in college, and in high school I was, doing my first soldering projects from an Instructable guide and working on, making sure my Hackintosh MacBook would work with different software. So I never really thought that I would be a stand up in front of a bunch of people and talk about this type person. But working with my PIRG chapter, I sort of got pulled into activism. Worked on campaigns around increasing recycling, updating the bottle bill, which is that 5-cent deposit on beer and soda bottles, registering voters, and I worked with students in New Jersey, in Oregon, and Washington to help them run these sorts of issues as well. About 2 years ago, we were able to launch this campaign, wedding that computer science tech geek interest with the organizing experience that I had. And it's been really exciting to just see the change that we've had in a relatively short amount of time, because I think this is an issue that we all have experienced at this point, but it's not one that has as much attention as some other issues around disposability and waste. I'm curious, has anyone thrown out something that they thought they shouldn't have to? Like, had they have to replace AirPods or phone or a laptop because the battery had died? Yeah, and you brought it to the Apple store, or you brought it to a repair shop, and they said it'd be more expensive to fix than actually just to replace the whole thing. So that is an increasing problem that's happening in our lives, and the effects are really harmful. So why should we care about this in the first place? The first thing, and I think it's worth highlighting, is that it's actually just really annoying. It's annoying to throw things out that should still work. We actually like our stuff. We want it to stay in use. We want to keep using it. It's a pain to have to go to a store and choose something new and change your whole life around this new product when you had something that worked just fine and now isn't working as well anymore. And then if you have a product that you use every day and it's in your home, maybe it's a smart home product, then actually it really is a big deal to have to switch and replace this thing that should still work. So the first thing is actually just that it's annoying, and it is sort of violating our consumer rights to keep using something that we expect should still work. The second thing is it's expensive, so we'll talk about the costs that come from all of this whirlwind of replacement, and then it is really bad for the environment. And so it's probably not surprising, but the extent to which it's bad might be. Has anyone seen Portlandia? Do people know the sketch? Okay, yes. This is the instant garbage sketch from Portlandia. I think this kind of gets at the annoying part. We are just increasingly being sold these disposable electronics that don't hold up and don't work. And because they are too cheap, it's not actually worth fixing them. So we just are stuck in this cycle of buying and using and tossing because it's actually so cheap, but it adds up over time. And this really does add up. So we found that Americans could save $49.6 billion per year by repairing instead of replacing our products. So we are spending a lot of money on consumer electronics, more and more each year. And while some of that comes from actually just buying more stuff, a lot of it comes from actually replacing what we've already bought. And we could save Americans a lot of money by just repairing things and keeping them in use. Okay, and then the last problem, this is the problem that I care the most about, is that it is just really bad for the environment. We are throwing out over 400,000 phones per day in the US. 400,000 phones every day is really hard to conceptualize. We just have this massive stuff problem. We are producing and shipping and extracting and consuming more than the Earth can support, and electronics are now a leading cause in this overall problem. So a lot of attention has been paid to single-use plastics, And we've made some really great gains there. But e-waste, or electronic waste, is actually the fastest growing waste stream, both domestically and in the world. We're throwing out 500 pounds of e-waste every second just in the US. And it also causes harms to our environment when it is disposed of, because it includes lots of toxic metals and other contaminants that harm our environment when they're put into landfills. So this is a huge problem, nothing we're just using for a couple of minutes like a plastic bag, but even a couple of days like a disposable e-cigarette or vape should be polluting our environment for hundreds of years to come, and increasingly that's happening with electronic waste. We would all like for recycling to be the solution, and the unfortunate reality is that we cannot recycle our way out of this problem. The first problem is that only 1/3 of e-waste globally is actually collected for recycling, and collected does not mean recovered. So it's great to make sure that the e-waste that you have in your home, those old phones and laptops and cables, get to a good recycling collection site. So there might be like a safe disposal event near you, or there might be an e-waste collection. You should do that. The worst thing you can do is actually keep it in your junk drawer, which I'm sure we're all guilty of. I do that as well, thinking that at some point in the future it's going to be, I don't know, you might need it, or you spent so much money, you feel guilty about getting rid of it. You should recycle it as soon as possible. Every year that it sits in your drawer, it's losing value. It's actually going to become less able to be fully recycled. But even if we're doing a good thing and we're putting our stuff in that special e-waste box or going to a pickup site, the reality is that most of those materials are not being recovered. So mostly recycling means shredding. That's what electronic e-waste recycling is for the most part. And about 20% of the materials from the phones that we recycle are lost. Phones now use lots of rare earth elements that power our devices on the circuit boards. About 99% of those are not recovered. So for the most part, people are not sitting with tweezers pulling off all of the neodymium and the gold and the little components on those circuit boards. Maybe the circuit board is being melted down and maybe some of those components are being collected, but the rare earth minerals are so in such small quantities, it's just not economically viable for these recycling facilities who are trying to do the right thing, but also are a business and need to make money to actually recover those materials. And then the thing that I really want to highlight here is 0 smartphones have actually been made from fully recycled materials. So there is no sort of magic bin where a fairy comes and takes the old phone and makes a new phone. That just does not happen. It has never happened. And it's not just a capacity problem, it is a technology problem. We might never have the technology to make a fully recycled smartphone. And so what comes from this too is that you'll see a lot of marketing around recycled plastic or recovered materials, or this laptop is made with plastic that comes from collected ocean plastics. And that's all great, right? And it's also great that we have laptops that are more efficient and use less electricity, but none of that really gets at the problem here. The problem is that 80% of the environmental costs that come from our products is in the manufacturing. It's making it in the first place. And so the best way to reduce the environmental effects of all of these electronics we buy is to use it for as long as possible. That is just the bottom line. Vast majority of the energy and the materials that it takes is making the thing in the first place. It's not plugging it in every night. It's not, making sure that it has the power it needs. It's actually producing it. So I would be sort of wary of some of those claims around energy efficiency or recycled content. So it kind of brings us to this conclusion, right, which is we just can't continue to consume, dispose of, and produce electronics at this rate. It is just not sustainable. We have to use things for longer, manufacture less, and keep things actually being functional. And we can't be stuck in this disposability treadmill where companies are selling us things that can't be upgraded, can't hold up, can't be mended, can't be repaired, or lose support and then have to be thrown out. So luckily, there's been a movement over the past 10 years to address one key part of this problem, which is the right to repair movement. Has anyone heard of right to repair? Okay, cool. Yes, most people already know. So this is just the right to fix your stuff, to have the parts, tools, and information you need to repair your laptop, your phone, or your car, or your dishwasher, or other things that we use in our life. So this is a photo from last month Students from PIRG chapters all across the country went to DC to advocate with our elected officials to support the right to repair, along with other issues. This is really exciting. This comes out of the research that we've done that found that there's barriers to repair that keep things from being in use for as long as possible. So it could just be that the screen breaks or the battery breaks, it's hard to fix that. Sometimes the charging ports get clogged, it's hard to fix that. Sometimes the schematics are on lockdown, or sometimes there's software that actually prevents repair. You might have to register that repair with Apple or with the company that makes the product. So we found this research, we found that we need the right to fix our stuff. This is just an example that I always like. These are all of the different screw heads on different phones that have come out in the last 10 years or so. You might not be surprised to learn that the way a screw works has not really changed in the last couple hundred years. We don't need all of these different screw heads. This is just a way that manufacturers keep us from having the tools to fix our stuff. So this is pretty sort of offensive. And it's not just phones and laptops, it's also John Deere tractors. So farmers that are trying to make sure that they can feed our country and feed their family and have an effective farm use tools that have a lot of computerized components at this point. John Deere tractors run software on them where when you replace a part, you need to register that repair. If you are miles and miles away from the closest licensed John Deere tractor facility, you might have crops that are rotting on the field when you can't get someone to come to register the part that you actually fixed yourself, but that the tractor doesn't understand that you fixed, right? Maybe you just had to replace a headlight. And yet, because that part isn't registered, your tractor is stuck in what they call limp mode, where it can't actually work. So this sort of has been a huge problem, but the good news is we've been making lots of progress. So now all 50 states, this is just a couple weeks ago, all 50 states have introduced right to repair legislation, which is really exciting. 4 states have passed laws, and this is really bipartisan, which is exciting as well. So yes, there's people that care about the environment, but there's also plenty of people that just care about the ownership rights, the ability to tinker, the fact that when you buy something, that means you should own it, and you should be able to do whatever you want with it. And so this is something that's really sort of having a lot of support on both sides of the aisle all across the country. We're also just seeing this in the product design. So this is the newest iPhone. It's the iPhone 16e. This was also released a couple weeks ago. So it has a 7 out of 10 repairability score from iFixit. They're one of our friends. They make all of the sort of repair kits that folks all across the country are using. This is a great improvement, right? So, I mean, of course, Apple has a lot of work to do to make things that are fixable, but now they have this new adhesive in the battery, which is pretty cool. You give it a 9-volt charge, and the adhesive in the battery dissolves, and then you can take the battery out. That's great. That makes it easier to repair your phone. They've made it so you can repair the charging port on the bottom for the first time. Apparently, it's quite an extensive advanced process. That's not so easy, but you can do that now, and so that's great. And so there's sort of all of these new laws are having an effect, whether it's outlawing software locks or requiring movable batteries in the EU, or just consumers pushing and knowing that they want the right to repair. It's having a real effect. So what's the problem? Well, the problem is that that's actually not enough. So even with the right to repair, we will still have glued-in batteries. We will still have software that prevents us from actually using things as long as we want. We'll still have stuff that is just not designed to last. It's not designed to hold up and actually allow us using things as long as we want. So our right to repair work has helped us win the right to fix our stuff, but we also need the will and the ability to keep things in use for as long as possible. And that's really what the Design to Last campaign is about. So there's a bunch of examples here. We'll talk about some of them. The top left is the newest iPhone 16 that was announced. I think one of the things that motivates this campaign is the fact that consumers are just not that excited about buying the new phone that is announced every year. That really having, a single more camera lens or a slightly brighter screen is not as exciting as it once was 5 or 10 years ago, where it really felt like we needed to upgrade. So the big thing in the iPhone 16, besides AI features that have been largely panned, right, is this extra button. So now we have another button. That's great. You can take a photo with that button. I don't think people are that excited to upgrade, and the sales numbers show that as well. And so really people actually just want things that are going to work and are going to last as long as possible. We're going to talk about printers and how they prevent us from using the ink cartridges we want. In the top right, that GIF that's animating, that is a single-use disposable vape with a screen that you can play a game on. If you are not in middle schools across the country, maybe you don't know that those exist, but they do, and principals are confiscating them by the bag load. Pretty absurd. There's also ones that look like calculators or look like Sharpies or other things, but increasingly they have single-use screens. You might be charged by a car company 15 euros a month to get heat warmers in the seats in the car you already bought. Or you might have your smart coffee mug that has a built-in battery that's essentially disposable that you can only replace by taking a hacksaw to the device. So again, there's all of these sort of problems that create this situation where it just feels like things don't last like they used to. And so we're going to talk about 5 different problem products and 5 different solutions to solve this overall problem. To get to a world where things are actually designed to last, it's not just up to the companies that make these products. We need to educate the public. We need to actually have companies innovate new solutions, like the charge-released adhesive in the new iPhone 16. That's, I think, a good innovation for repairability and long-lasting stuff. We need consumers to put pressure on companies that are making bad decisions, and we do need new regulation as well to take this into account. Okay, so 5 problem products, 5 solutions. The first problem product here is the AirPod. Has anyone had to replace their AirPod because the battery didn't work anymore? Okay, yeah, I'm seeing some hands. So AirPods have lithium-ion batteries in them, the same that are in your phone. And those are just inherently consumable. They will not last forever. They can die in as quickly as 18 months or about 2 years or so. Once the battery in your AirPod dies, that's it. There's no repairing it. iFixit tried to repair these AirPods, and you basically can take an X-Acto knife and rip the whole thing open and get the battery out. And okay, well, now you don't have an AirPod anymore. So if you go to an Apple store and you say, hey, my AirPods are not working, they're under warranty, I need a new battery, or if you just want to pay for repair, they do what is sort of, I think, euphemistically called like a replace repair, which means they throw it out and they give you a new one, right? So there is no repairing these AirPods. They need to be thrown out. And this is a big problem because AirPods, Apple is actually the most popular brand of headphones on the market. They have sold over 400 million AirPods, and they are designed to die. And it doesn't have to be this way, right? I mean, we do have products that now have replaceable batteries. You see a Sony headphone on the top right. There's the Fair Buds in the bottom right. There's a new headphone on the left there that actually has a battery that can be replaced. So we could have batteries that are replaceable, and Apple should sort of follow suit and make sure that this is happening. The good news is there's a policy in the EU that's going to push companies to do this. And so we sort of need these companies to actually comply and make sure that they're making products with batteries that are replaceable. And this isn't just annoying because it's offensive. It is also really, really terrible for our environment. So you're seeing photos right now from a 2016 exploration of the Marianas. This is some of our sort of unexplored or underexplored deep sea ocean ecosystems. Companies are now proposing that we mine for critical minerals in the Pacific Ocean so that we have those materials for electronics and for the green transition. There's neodymium, which is going to be mined in the ocean. In our headphones, there's lithium that powers our electronic vehicles and our phones and laptops that's in the batteries. And this is a huge problem, right? Because we're now going to disturb these ecosystems to get the minerals that are required to power some devices that are really important, right? Think devices for the green transition, like electric vehicles, but also headphones that are disposable after 2 years. So we just need to think critically about what are we using these finite minerals on, and disposable headphones is not a good reason. The other reason why this doesn't really work, right, is because we've actually found that if we used circular economy methods and recycled rather than replaced these materials, we could close a lot of the gap that's projected in these minerals, and we wouldn't need to mine maybe at all in the ocean for these materials. So sort of the solution, right, the solution to our mineral problem is not at the deep sea, it's in our pocket. It's just not throwing out the headphones that we all have that need to be replaced all the time. So We just need to require removable batteries. It's pretty simple. That's the solution to this problem. The EU in 2028 is going to require this. We should also require this in the US, and we should push companies to comply as well. Seems pretty basic. My little bonus product here, though, for this first problem is disposable electronic vapes. We're throwing out 4.5 vapes per second in the US. If we lined them up side to side, it would stretch across the continental US and back each year. And so this is a huge problem. Again, you might not see it if you're not in the target demographic, but actually just kind of around the conference, I do see a lot of disposable vapes on the sidewalk. And now that I've told you about it, you're going to see them everywhere too. I promise, they're sort of everywhere. And so some products maybe just shouldn't exist. I think a disposable vape with a battery that could be charged 300 times that's just used for a couple of days, that's sort of absurd. And so our friends with PIRG in California have introduced a bill, that's what you're seeing right now, to ban single-use disposable vapes. Australia has banned them, New Zealand has banned them, the UK has banned them. This is also bipartisan. There's plenty of people who care about the environmental effects. There's also plenty of people that don't want these illicit foreign manufactured products to be flooding store shelves all across the US, because the vast, vast majority of disposable vapes are actually not authorized for sale in the US. Okay, so let's talk about the second problem here. Has anyone heard about the Peloton activation fee? Some folks have. So Peloton, right, this was like a COVID darling stock that sort of rose all the way to the top because everyone was going to work out at home and pay this subscription fee forever. Well, now people are kind of selling their Pelotons. They're not quite as excited about them anymore. And the problem is that if you want to buy a used Peloton, now you have to pay a $95 activation fee after you've bought it. So $95 for this product that costs a lot of money maybe is not, sort of so outrageous in sort of practice in and of itself. But the idea that companies can come in and sort of change the terms of ownership, right? When I sell my car, Ford does not charge the new owner of the car a fee to use it, but we're allowing companies like Peloton to do that now because software gives them the ability to do so. So this is sort of outrageous just because when we own things, we should get what we pay for. And if we don't, then that actually is sort of changing what it means to own something or is just ripping us off. You shouldn't lose features after you buy something just because of software restriction. The other big example here is printers. So lots of printers have restrictions that prevent you from using third-party or refilled ink cartridges. That's a shame because refilled ink cartridges are much, much cheaper. So we found that wholesale ink is about $1.18 per fluid ounce. The ink in the cartridge is about $118 per fluid ounce. So it's like more of a markup than the Martin Shkreli big increase in the diabetes drug that everyone got really upset about. So it's sort of an insane procedure that we accept that we have to use the ink that just comes from the manufacturer and pay a huge markup for the privilege of doing so. Again, this would be like if Ford said you could only buy gas, from our partnered, fuel provider. That's sort of absurd. When you buy something, you should be able to use whatever you want in it. This also happened with the SNU baby bassinet, where folks wanted to buy them used, and then you had to pay a fee, or you had to sort of now buy a subscription to get features which previously had been free. So the solution here is that this is probably already illegal. When you advertise that products have certain features, you have to follow through on that promise, right? It is unfair and deceptive marketing to claim that something you buy is going to do something and then to take that away. So already the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission, they put out a report last year that was all on smart products. First thing they found that was surprising was that 89% of the products they looked at, they couldn't see at all how long the manufacturer said they were going to support it. So you just have no idea what you're getting into before you buy it. But the second thing that was really interesting is they said that, taking away features, that might already violate the FTC Act. So they said if a manufacturer makes an express or implied representation regarding how long the product will function or be usable, it may be a deceptive practice if the manufacturer fails to disclose how long it will provide necessary software updates. So in that case, they're talking just about the software updates, but to my mind, it makes sense that removing features that have been advertised is a very sort of similar problem. So we just need enforcers to actually step up and sort of reinforce what it means to own something in the age of everything is computer, where we have software in all of our products. We can't accept that just because software allows manufacturers to take away these rights, that means that they should get the ability to do so. Okay, the third product is just MacBooks, which are good products, right? I have a MacBook right here, that's what I use, but they are just not that easy to repair. And unfortunately, when we are shopping, we don't know how fixable something is before we buy it. So this is from a report we did recently called Failing the Fix that looked at the repairability of different phones and laptops and ranked them. So on the left, you have an Asus laptop for about $1,500, and then there's the MacBook Pro, which is about $2,000. You can see the MacBook is much less repairable than the Asus. And just, I can tell you this from personal experience because I tried to replace the battery in my MacBook Pro. I'd like to think I'm a pretty experienced fixer at this point. iFixit says it's moderate. I don't know if it's moderate. I would say it's probably pretty difficult. They say it's 2 to 3 hours, and that is accurate. You got to take off the screen. You got to take out the antenna. You got to take off the keyboard. You have to take everything out of the computer before you replace the battery. And again, this is a shame because we know that the battery will need to be replaced. It's only going to last a couple of years before it starts losing its charge. And so 27 steps to replace this battery. That's really difficult. So right now, consumers, unless they are super informed consumers who are looking at various websites and grading things on repairability, they just don't know if what they're buying is fixable or not before they spend hundreds of dollars on a product. And that is a problem because it means that people don't know what they're getting into. It's also a problem because manufacturers don't then have any pressure to actually make things that are fixable. And so the solution here is something called repair scores. These are 1 through 10 scores that tell you how fixable something is before you buy it. We think of these as like fuel economy stickers for repairability. So when you buy a car, you know about how fuel efficient it is, you know how safe it is. You can take that into account. In fact, they have to put it on a sticker right on the window, in the car dealership floor. Other countries in the EU already have these repairability scores for phones and laptops and appliances and vacuum cleaners and things like that. And we need to bring these to the US as well. There's some movement, which is really exciting. So Colorado has passed a resolution calling for national repair scores. Oregon has introduced a resolution as well. And then New York and Pennsylvania have both introduced bills that would bring repair scores to their states. So if we think of right to repair as the floor, sort of requiring a minimum level of repairability, this is the ceiling, right? Or this is the carrot. This is the way that we can kind of inspire a race to the top for repairability so that we can actually choose things and reward companies that are making things that are more fixable and sort of continue to innovate on having things that actually are going to last a long time. And this is already working. So for the iPhone 14, we saw that previously the iPhone X had this horrible back panel where you had to crack it and scrape it and rip it just to replace the glass on the back panel, which again is sort of absurd because when you drop the iPhone, sometimes the back panel breaks. It was a big common repair. After repair scores were introduced in France, we now have iPhones that have removable back panels that are much easier to repair. This is exciting. So, I think maybe the people in this room, we want things that are really fixable and are going to last a long time. That's great. If there's other people here that want to buy something that sort of is the newest, greatest thing and they don't care if it's repairability, maybe that's fine as well. But we just need to know what actually is fixable and sort of let people reward companies that are doing things that are actually designed to last. Okay, the fourth problem product here is the Humane AI pin. I'm seeing some nods. Has anyone heard of this excellent product? And of course, everyone who's raising their hand bought it. Well, no, unfortunately, no one really bought this thing. This was a pin that was going to replace your phone and sort of act as your gateway to the internet without having to look at a screen. Maybe that's a good idea, but it just didn't sell that well, right? And so recently, Humane announced that they were shutting down, they were cutting access to the cloud service. This is going to become a paperweight. And unfortunately, this is not the only product that this has happened to. There's lots of products that launch that are maybe part of a startup, and they just don't sell as well as the manufacturer hopes they would, and then they cut the cloud service so that the product does not work at all. So we call this a quick death, right? We'll talk about slow deaths in a little bit, but this is sort of a quick death where they just turn the lights off and the thing you bought doesn't do anything at all. So Humane was launched in April of 2024. 10 months later, in February 2025, it shut down. I think it's easy to have a little bit of schadenfreude here. Like, I get it. I think probably we all can sit in this room and feel like, okay, well, I didn't buy the multi-$100 AI smart pen, so at least I'm savvy enough not to do that. But increasingly, this is not just going to be a problem for early adopters and sort of the most excited tech geeks, right? Spotify Car Thing, which was a product that was in your car that would let you choose your music, kind of actually a product, right, for not early adopters, because it's for people who have older cars that didn't have built-in, systems for connecting to Spotify. They shut that down, and so that's not going to work at all. The Moxie robot, which was a robot for kids with developmental disabilities, that shut down, and that's not working at all. The Oculus Go, Fitbit trackers, our phones and laptops, all of these sort of products lose support, and then they stop working. And again, everything is computer now, everything is software, so it's not just our phones and laptops, it's also our cars. So in China, there are EVs that have lost cloud support and now don't have access to the entertainment system because it was a startup. We almost had this in the US with Fisker. Luckily, we've sort of been able to avoid some of these problems where people have swept in to keep things working, but we're not going to be able to avoid that forever. Another example was the Juicebox EV charger. I heard about a school in New Mexico that had purchased the commercial version of this product, and when support ended, they were left scrambling to sort of find someone who would make sure that all of their electric vehicles and school buses could be charged on site. So it's not just people who are buying AI pins, it's really all of us who now are affected by this. And then even if you don't care about the environmental effects, right, people are just not going to buy new products if they're constantly afraid they're being sold something that is going to become a brick at any minute. So if these manufacturers want consumers to trust them and to actually trust that it's worth buying something, they really need to commit to us that the thing we're buying is going to last a certain amount of time. So the solution here is the right to reuse, right? We should be able to install whatever software we want on a product that we buy. We can replace our car's parts with whatever third-party parts we want, but we can't install whatever software we want on the things that we buy, and that doesn't really make sense because there have been some really great examples from the sort of hacker, tinkerer, open source community. Really what we need is just for people who don't have that depth of technical skills to have that ability as well. So this is a really cool example that actually comes from Samsung, of all places, called Galaxy Upcycling, where they sort of had this little team in 2017 looking at all of the ways that they could use old phones to sort of make new, excellent products. They had things like a baby monitor, they had things like a fish tank, pH level monitor, they had it play old games, they had it be an alarm clock. None of these are sort of like earth-shattering things, but if you think about all of the products that people are buying, like video doorbells or sensors for their home, there's no reason why they couldn't use an old phone to accomplish that. They have the hardware already. It's just that the software is preventing them from doing it. The other example is after the Spotify Car Thing shut down, this sort of huge community on Reddit sort of sprung up and people have been keeping them in use. Again, this is great, and it's cool that these sort of enthusiasts are keeping things working, but what we really need is the right to reuse, where when something fails, you can just click a button and install some new thing on it and have it sort of accomplish that new task. Okay, so again, I think the key thing here is that if companies no longer have the financial interest in keeping something running, why do they have the financial interest in preventing us from installing what we want on it? So if you're not going to pay for the thing to still work, that might be totally fine. Maybe it didn't sell that well. Maybe that's fine. But now the thing that I bought, I should be able to install whatever I want on it. You can't now prevent me and lock down from using it how I want when you're not going to support it anymore. That's what it means to own something. Okay, so the last category here is slow death. So these are Chromebooks. Chromebooks are incredibly popular laptops that are used in schools all across the country, especially during 2020. The CARES Act provided many, many millions of dollars of funding for schools to buy Chromebooks so that they could provide distance learning for their students. Unfortunately, what people did not know when they bought all these Chromebooks is that they have expiration dates after which software support ends. Once that date passes, you can't update the browser. And while it might not all happen at once, pretty soon you're not going to be able to use the websites that you need to actually keep these Chromebooks doing what they're supposed to do. You might not be able to access Google Docs, or you might not be able to access Google Drive or Netflix or the school state testing website, whatever it is, they're going to become increasingly out of date, and so schools have to replace them. So this is a pile of Chromebooks that the school had to replace that were otherwise totally fully functional, but had expired and no longer could be used. So when we found out about this problem, we released a report called Chromebook Churn with a couple of pretty surprising findings. The first one was that the environmental effects of doubling the life of Chromebooks is pretty large. It would be equivalent to taking 900,000 cars off the road for a year. It could save schools $1.8 billion across all K through 12 public school students, assuming no additional maintenance costs. And that when we released this report, the average Chromebook's expiration date was only 4 years away. And then again, as we've said, you can't recycle your way out of this. So we released this report in front of Google's offices in Cambridge. We had some students that actually talked about how they were volunteering with their school, or they had an internship with their school to repair laptops, and how much they loved sort of fixing all the laptops that students broke, but how upset they were that there were these piles of laptops that were leaned up against the corner in the back of the school's room that just had to be recycled or thrown out because they couldn't be fixed. We got a lot of coverage, which was exciting, and again, sort of across the aisle. So, everyone from PC Gamer to Breitbart to the local news was upset that schools had all of these laptops that they had to throw out just because they had lost software support. There's more Wall Street Journal, Mercury News, and Colorado Sun as well. And to make a long story short, after lots of organizing and sort of getting students and teachers and PTAs to sign on to letters and sort of getting a lot of media coverage and getting ABC Go to cover this as well, we won, which was really exciting. And Google announced that they would offer 10 years of support for all Chromebooks, no matter the model. This is a really good first step. 10 years for a laptop, I think, is sort of something that we would all think is pretty substantive and impressive at this point. And this has actually then helped laptops that were going to be thrown out stay in use and stay in schools. So that is pretty exciting. But it is not just Chromebooks, right? All software has a point when which it is no longer supported, in which it expires. And once people are not maintaining that software anymore, you're left with something that is insecure and will just slowly stop working. So you might think, well, I don't really care if my thing gets hacked, or I don't really have any data on here that's that important. This is an old Chromebook that I gave to my kid to watch Netflix. That might be true, but without security updates, you increasingly will not actually be able to access the websites or use the applications or use the software you want. And so while security is really important and we should be concerned about that, if not for yourself, we should be concerned about all of our old printers and routers being scooped up into botnets and then sort of being used to attack other things across the country. Even security concerns aside, we just actually can't use things for as long as we'd like to when the software expires. And so the solution here is that we just need to actually set some minimum expectations for how long things are supposed to last. And for phones and laptops, maybe that's somewhat clear, but increasingly it's not just phones and laptops that have software, it's also our refrigerators and dishwashers and appliances. And I'm seeing people sort of like shaking their heads in disgust, and I totally get that reaction. This was Samsung's demo at the Consumer Electronics Expo, CES, this year, where they said, finally, we can all have the future we wanted and take phone calls on a refrigerator, which is not really what I wanted to do, to be honest, especially when my phone is in my pocket, but it's happening, basically, is the upshot. At this point, you can't buy a TV that isn't smart, and we should expect that you're not going to be able to buy a dishwasher or washing machine or refrigerator that isn't smart in the future as well. And so at the very least, we need to set some minimum expectation for how long these products are supposed to last before they lose support. Perhaps laptops should last for at least 7 years or 10 years, phones at least 5 years, washing machines and refrigerators at least 10 years. And perhaps when that support ends, they still need to actually have their basic functionality. Physical buttons, I can turn the thing on, I'm not left with this brick of a dishwasher just because the app has died and I can't start it from my phone or from the panel on the front. So manufacturers need to make a promise to consumers about what it is they're actually offering. And while transparency from things like repair scores or transparency about how long software is supposed to last is really important as well. In fact, Consumer Reports and PIRG just put out some new policy today about requiring disclosure of how long things are going to last. That's great. That is a really important step. We also need to set some minimum expectations for how things should last based on the category they're in. The upshot here, right, is that you got to get what you're paid for, otherwise you're getting ripped off. Software does not change what it means to own something. Selling a product with certain features and then not having them work is just unfair and deceptive marketing. That's already not allowed. And so part of this is enforcement, and part of this is making sure that manufacturers understand that just because they can restrict things doesn't mean they actually have the right to. So looking through these 5 products with 5 different solutions again, right? We talked about AirPods with embedded batteries. The solution here is just you shouldn't have embedded batteries. That can't be replaced. We have Peloton losing features and charging a fee after purchase. You can't do that. That already should be illegal against the FTC Act. When you advertise products with having certain features, they have to work. We don't know if MacBooks are fixable before we buy them. Repair scores, 1 through 10 scores that tell you how fixable something is before you purchase. That will solve that problem. The Humane AI Pin software that's driving e-waste. We need the right to reuse and install whatever software on our AI Smart Pin or Spotify car thing or whatever it is we buy after it stops being supported. And then with Chromebooks with short-lived software, we actually just might need extended warranties. So in this case, we pushed Google in particular to change their policy and commit to have Chromebooks last for 10 years. But maybe schools need to pass policies to say, hey, we're not going to buy educational technology that lasts for less than 10 years. And maybe we need laws that actually say, okay, if you're going to use software on a refrigerator, the refrigerator's got to work for at least 10 years before it stops being supported. Okay, I have a bonus product here, which is Windows 10. Which is going to expire in October of 2025. So, this has been supported for a long time, which is good. But what is not good is that Windows 11 is not largely backwards compatible with machines that run Windows 10. So in the past, you kind of get that annoying pop-up and it tells you to upgrade and you click OK and OK, fine. You had to you don't like the changes that Microsoft made, but you can get security updates and you update it and the thing still works. This is different. Up to 400 million PCs across the world cannot upgrade to Windows 11. This could be the largest jump in junked computers ever. All across the world, people are using these machines. They're not going to be able to upgrade them. If they can't upgrade them, they won't be secure, and their companies will tell them to replace them. And so this is a huge problem. We have already made some sort of advances in this. We delivered 20,000 petition signatures to Microsoft calling on them to extend support for Windows 10. We had a little victory here. They announced that schools will be able to extend support for $1 per machine per year. That's exciting. So that's good. It's better than nothing. And then for the first time ever, regular people, we will all be able to pay a small fee to keep our machines running for 3 extra years. So that is a good first step. But the best way for Microsoft to actually reach their commitment of carbon neutrality by 2030 would be to extend support automatically. And they have not done that yet. And then we still estimate that hundreds of millions of PCs will be thrown out in October when support ends. And that is something that Microsoft could actually just change right now. So again, how are we going to actually get to these 5 solutions and get to a world where things are designed to last? The first step is just to kind of educate the public, right? People who don't want to replace their things every year should have the ability and the know-how to keep things in use and know that they don't have to buy the new iPhone just because it has an extra button on the side. We do need some new innovation, so companies have a role to play here as well. They need to actually develop ways to kind of keep things as small and light as we like, but actually have them be long-lasting and repairable. We as consumers need to call out bad corporate behavior, like the lack of upgradability for Windows 10 or Microsoft or Google not having Chromebooks last as long as they should. And then we need new laws. We need regulation for the age of software that makes sure that things last as long as they should and that we really have the rights to tinker with what we buy. So they need to think about their responsibilities the same as they always were and not use software to redefine ownership. We have a e-waste graveyard report coming out on April 3rd, which is going to have over 100 products that have lost support in the last 10 years and become e-waste. We're going to reveal how much weight that is and how much carbon went into manufacturing all of these products. And so again, this is sort of the education component. Right now it feels like there's all these little discrete things, and there's the AI pins, and there's the car thing, and well, I don't own that, so I don't really care, right? But again, it's not just these small products, it's all of our phones that lose software support, it's all of our laptops that lose software support, it's increasingly all of these smart home devices and our appliances that are losing support as well. And so while it sort of can be fun to make fun of the people that, sort of bought something that maybe they shouldn't have, that then stopped working, increasingly we all have this problem, and it's also affecting our planet. And so we need to actually commit to having things that last longer. We need to push back against bad decisions by corporations. The Chromebooks campaign and the Windows 10 campaign has showed that companies will change their policies when they get bad press. And so we need to sort of make sure that these companies know that they can't get away by seeming like climate champions while also making sure that things end up in the trash. And then we need to step up enforcement of existing laws, sort of meet the moment. And this really is nonpartisan. The initial right to repair work started under Trump's first term, and all 50 states have introduced bills for right to repair. So enforcing existing laws against unfair and deceptive marketing practice has always been against the law, and it still is, and it's not something that only one party cares about. Sort of we all care about making sure that we sort of get what we pay for. One thing that I just sort of want to end with that really gives me hope is that this is already happening at a grassroots level. So people are sort of resisting this urge to throw things out, and they want to keep things in use. So this is a picture of a repair cafe. These happen all across the country. This is when neighbors come together and they fix each other's stuff. Mostly it's not high-tech stuff like what we've been talking about. It's more like lamps and appliances, KitchenAid stand mixers and furniture and things like that. But this gets back to the sort of very first thing that we started with, right? Which is that the reason why this is bad is because it's annoying and people don't want to throw things out that still work. We can talk about all the environmental and all of the economic effects, and that's totally true, but I think fundamentally we just want stuff that lasts a long time and does its job well and is part of our life for a long time. And so repair clinics all across the country and all across the world show that people really want to end this cycle of buy, use, toss, and they know that we really deserve better than a world where nothing's built to last. So I want to end by us actually doing something rather than just talking about the problem ad nauseum, and then we'll have some time for Q&A. The first thing is that if you have had one of these problems or something I said sort of reminded you of a problem you had, please file a complaint with the FTC. They need these complaints when they take action and enforcement action, and the more people that are filing complaints about products that should work but are losing software support, whether it's a slow death or a fast death or a battery that couldn't be replaced, file a complaint with the FTC and let them know that you're not happy with the way that that product was sold to you. The second is that you should scan this QR code and sign our petition calling on Microsoft to extend support for Windows 10. We think that we can kind of continue to push Microsoft, especially as we get closer to the expiration date in October. They already made some concessions by extending support for schools and for individual consumers, but there's really no technical reason why those 400 million PCs have to be left by the wayside when October comes and Windows 10 dies. And the last thing is, sort of make a commitment to yourself about buying from brands that make products that are designed to last. So really do some research maybe before you do your next upgrade and think, okay, what can I buy that's going to last as long as possible? Is it repairable? Does it have a battery that's going to die? If that battery, and when that battery does die, will I be able to get it fixed? Do I know what my local repair shop is? And sort of, can I just walk over there and give them the thing? All of that's just going to help you feel more confident and prepared to keep things in use when they inevitably do need service or repair or mending, because we've always need to mend and repair things for the entirety of the human experience. That has not gone away. And if we want to actually keep things in use, we sort of have to take some responsibility as well to make sure that we're getting things fixed. So I will end it there and just thank you so much for coming. If folks have any questions, happy to take them now, and then we'll probably have some time to talk at the end as well. I do want to hear your stories about sort of how frustrating it was to throw out that thing that should still work but didn't. I'm very excited to hear that, but thanks so much for your time. Thanks. Yeah. And if folks have any question, you can just walk up to the mic there.
Hi, thank you so much for this talk. I really appreciate how you shed light on the issue and also kind of made it more actionable for us. I was really curious, I think even at this conference, I've seen a lot of people with like a work computer and a normal computer and a work phone and a normal phone. And I was wondering kind of like, especially, you know, in the workforce, how do you navigate dealing with the fact that like a lot of people nowadays don't just have one device for one purpose, but two, and like what to do about that in terms of waste?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think sometimes companies can think that there's this conflict between sustainability and security, and I don't think that that's true, right? So, you know, there might be some policies around only having work things on work devices and vice versa, and that might be appropriate. But the thing that's really exciting about these companies that have these huge fleets of laptops for their employees all across the world is that they could just decide to have them last longer, right? So the way it works now is that IT budgets are built to say, okay, well, we buy everyone a new laptop every 2 years or 3 years or 4 years or whatever it is. Okay, we'll make it 5, make it 6. There's actually just no reason why they need to do that. And sort of buying refurbished laptops and procuring things that are gonna last longer and making budgets that reflect the fact that things don't need to be replaced as often, and then having, you know, sort of people that work for those companies not complain about having things that are older as well. All of that is key and is gonna be a big part of making sure that we're sort of leaving that disposability treadmill for laptops in companies.
Hello, I'm really glad that you brought in the idea of repairability and reuse. I think that's a really key area. I did many years ago my thesis for grad school, specifically on electronic recycling. And reuse is definitely by far the most effective way to really get value. And one of the things that I looked at in my report and worked with other electronic recyclers is really trying to create another market. So there are other markets for reuse. And now we're in an age with, you know, companies are not really putting that much attention on the hardware. They're much more focused on software or, like you said, ink cartridges. So that's how they're making their money but I think you touched on something, and I think it's something that could be used in the idea of, okay, if we don't want, if they're trying to build more business and consumer goods in the developed market, then let's create other software and programs for reuse in the developing world. So rather than say, okay, maybe Windows 10 is extended so long in the US market, but maybe they'll do another extension in Africa for another 10 years, and things like that. So I think that I just wanted to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. Yeah, you bring up a good point, which is that it's what I think of as the Peloton effect, right? Which is that people realize that they can make a lot more money by charging subscription services than by getting you to buy a physical hardware, right? So now even car companies are like, well, it's not really a car, it's a platform, and you know, you're gonna buy these add-ons, and so everyone wants to be Peloton. The counterexample is Instapot, right? Which just made a product that was too good. So they made a product that was too successful and lasted too long, and they don't break, and you don't need to buy a new, you know, pressure cooker every year. And so people didn't like, you know, Wall Street didn't like that, right? And that's why we need regulation, right? So as much as things like repair scores and consumer education are really important, we also just need to set a minimum floor and say, listen, you can't actually, you know, take away features and charge a subscription fee after you've bought something. You know, in terms of reuse in developing countries, that is exactly why we shouldn't keep all of our phones and laptops in our junk drawers and not give them away. So there's a great group called Edutunity, which takes laptops and connects them with schools all across the world, and you can, you know, they'll look up online, you can look at Call to Recycle, and I think they also link to places that will take old phones and laptops and donate them. It's all very local, so you know, there's like PCs for People and Think Geek in Portland, and there's sort of all of these great nonprofits that are collecting devices and giving them a second life. And it could just be, you know, giving it to like your niece or nephew or like someone else in your family as well. That could be another way to get them to reuse. Yeah, thanks.
Hi.
Yeah. Hi.
I probably don't need the mic, but I'll stand close enough. I love the idea about this reusability score. However, I'm in that boat of I love my tech, I love the new gadgets, but I also hold on to my gadgets as long as they do. So I'm not going to come to the next product until my old one's sorry, already dead. And I'd like to hear your thoughts about how we can change some of the onus back on the companies and perhaps incentivize them to make things last longer, and perhaps, I don't know if that's a minimum life score that they need to have, so that we're not having to replace them and that they're earning the consumer trust that way.
Totally, yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, the way that you do that with repair scores is you make it harder every year to get a good score, right? So you really create this race to the top for repairability where you say, okay, we're starting, you'll get a 5 if, you meet these minimum expectations and you have the parts available and they're not too expensive and the software support is lasting at least this long. Okay, but now it's been 3 years since we released the score. We're going to update it and say it's harder to do that. And that's how a lot of these sort of labels and certifications work, right? It's harder every year to get a good grade because we actually are trying to push the market and we know that they can go much farther than they are on making things that are repairable. So you don't want if every phone that comes out 1 year is getting a 10 out of 10, that's actually not that helpful, right? So you probably only want 20% or something and getting an 8 or above. Yeah.
You somewhat covered my question, but I would like to ask one of the regulatory questions that may happen. Like the last thing that you covered here was extending the overall lifespan of the system itself, right?
Yeah.
But here is a caveat that comes in here because the companies would not like to do this because that will hamper their sales cycle, right? Mm-hmm. So how can regulatory policies in these places help both sides as a win-win? Because people want longer-lasting products, but companies want sale, right?
Right.
I still remember I had my Acer for 3.5 years, and I had a warranty of 2.5 years, and I still remember after 2.5 years, the keyboard went off. Mm-hmm. And then I had to repair the thing, and I didn't have a warranty for that thing, so just remember.
Yeah.
This is what they plan for. The devices are such planned that it will go off just after your warranty ends. And it's like, now what to do?
Right. Yeah, I think one of the points that I'm trying to make too is that if we can't expect anything we buy to work, people are not going to spend as much money on buying new things, right? So, of course, overall, we just need to actually consume less, right, is the reality. And companies need to be able to, be successful, functioning companies in line with that reality of what we need to do. But if we're worried about every single thing we buy being like the humane AI pin or car thing, people are going to say, okay, well, I'm not going to buy new tech because I don't know if it's going to work. And so having that, that's why we have warranties, right? Like it's why we already have existing consumer protection law. It actually helps the marketplace function to make sure that consumers feel confident that they're going to get what they pay for, and they're not concerned about getting ripped off at every single transaction, and actually avoiding then buying from, sort of a big purchase that could be riskier. So I think that's the win-win, right? But ultimately, I also think that, we just have to do it. So even if it maybe decreases the sales cycle a little bit, I'm sure there's plenty of other ways that Apple, Microsoft, and Samsung and Google can continue to be extremely profitable.
I'd like to take one point here. If you remember, when iPhone's newer version comes in, it just discontinues the lower two versions to just compel you to use the newer version, and you're not able to use the iPhone 14 for the case of it.
Right.
And you're like, you have to use iPhone 16 or else it is like nowhere.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I just wanted to start first with a comment and then a question. I think there might have been a photo of it in one of your slides, but just to shout out Framework.
Framework.
Framework, yeah.
Uh-huh.
So they've been working on truly modular, repairable laptops, and they have survived the first generation that so many have failed before them. So you can actually just upgrade the motherboard and get a new CPU. But they also have been open sourcing their physical designs, so people can make their own modules to plug into their laptops to get a new SD card or USB device, but also taking those old motherboards and putting them into different chassis. So if you replace it, you can use it somewhere else. But my question is, with the Spotify car thing in particular,
car thing. Uh-huh.
Yeah, with the Spotify car thing, Spotify did eventually open source what the software bootloader that went to it, mostly under duress from the community. Meta, I believe, did not open source any of their software regarding the Oculus Go due to concerns about how that could affect their current hardware and its safety.
Yeah.
While extending support is great, is there anything in the pipeline that you see legislation-wise to compel people to open source at least bootloaders when their devices eventually fall out of support?
Yeah. Yeah, this sort of gets into this controversial, actually, topic in this issue, which is that sometimes people derisively call this like hopen source, right? Which is, does hoping that everything's going to be open source actually solve the problem? I'm not so sure, to be honest. Partly it's sort of all of the technical issues that you brought up, like there's all these licensings for all of the different components that are part of the software. Partly it's, the Spotify car thing, it turns out that it was always open source, but it was just on, someplace on GitHub that people had not seen it. And yet that still doesn't make it really easy to add new software and flash the hardware, right? So to my mind, yes, more things open source is great, and we want to support the open source community, and we want to support the tinkerers and the hackers, and that's excellent. But for someone who is not technically that skilled, I still want them, when their Chromebook expires, to be able to just click a button and get some other operating system on there that's still going to work. And so to my mind, it really is the right to reuse, and it's the right to install software of your choosing in a very simple kind of one-click way. And open source might be part of that, but it actually doesn't then solve that problem.
So where are we in that right to reuse process?
We are just at the beginning. I would say. I think we're at the consumer outrage point, and then maybe there'll be some, we're sort of pushing for transparency policy, to be honest. So first, it's the policy that was just released today about knowing how long things are going to last and having repair scores and being able to choose. And then the next step will be, okay, but if I bought the thing, shouldn't I be able to install whatever I want on it? Yeah. And I think last question here, because then they're going to kick. Oh, nope, no questions. Sorry, we're done. But if you want to talk to me, I'll be in the hallway. Thank you so much.